الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومطاعنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أمن هو قانت آناء الليل ساجدا وقائما يحذر الآخرة ويرجو رحمة ربه قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب صدق الله العظيم. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من مات وهو يطلب العلم ليحيي به الإسلام ليس بينه وبين النبوة إلا درجة واحدة أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Respected ulama kiram and fellow students, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's favor, grace, mercy, it is upon each and every one of us that in this age of zulmat, in this age of darkness, in this age that is reminiscent, reminds one of the prophecy of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wherein he said, Badiru bil a'mal fitanan ka qita'im min al-layl al-mudhlim. He said, hasten towards a'mal, persevere on a'mal. Why? Because fitnas are coming, tests, trials, tribulations. Allah Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam gave the parable and example of these fitnas with the onset of sections of a dark night. Ulama explained this parable. They say the transition from daylight to darkness, which occurs on a daily basis, is something that is gradual. Light doesn't immediately turn to darkness, but the darkness stealthily encroaches upon one, till all of a sudden one realizes it is completely dark. So secretly, stealthily, fitnas are coming. كَقِطَعٍ مِّنَ اللَّيْلِ الْمُظْلِمِ. And what will be the effect of these fitnas? يُصْبِحُ الرَّجُلُ مُؤْمِنًا وَيُمْسِي كَافِرًا. يُمْسِي مُؤْمِنًا وَيُصْبِحُ كَافِرًا. Such will be the extent, the peril, the danger in these fitnas. The Rasul Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the person in the morning will have iman, by the evening he will have become a kafir. People with miftahul jannah, with the key to jannah, born with iman, by the evening will have iman, by the next morning will have become a kafir. And what will be the underlying cause? يَبِيعُ دِينَهُ بِعَرَضٍ مِّنَ الدُّنْيَا. He said, my ummah will sell their deen for the trivial returns of this world. My ummah will sell their deen. Last year our Jamaat was working in an area about 3 hours from Durban, South Africa, a place called Ladysmith. There was a Jamaat from Indonesia. There were 10 brothers in the Jamaat. 9 of them were over 60 years of age. They were out for 4 months in the path of Allah. This Jamaat, of the 10 of them, 9 couldn't even speak English. They were working in South Africa. There was only one person who spoke broken English. We asked him some karguzari. Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country in the world. He said our population is about 280 million. 280 million people. There are 13,000 islands in Indonesia. He says in the last 20 or 30 years, more than 10% of the population, in other words, more than 30 million people have become murtad. More than 30 million people born with Iman have forsaken the Iman and gone to another religion. this is minimum estimate. This is just one country. He says myself, he says I come from one island where there are 1.6 million Muslims, and there is not one alim. Not one person who is able to teach deen in the entire island. A few years ago, our Jamaat was in Nigeria, in Africa, the most populous Muslim country. We were working in one area, there was one alim who had qualified in Medina Munawwara. He says 15 years ago when I came to this area, there was 100% Muslim. At that time the Padri, the head of the church that came to open an office in this area, he says I had a meeting with him. And he said our goal, our target is that every fourth house in this area will become Christian. He says 10 or 15 years have passed. He says, Maulvi Sahib, go and look for yourself. Every 8 houses there are a cross. There's a cross. Such a period, such a tide of zulmat and darkness has befallen this ummah. يُصْبِحُ الرَّجُلُ مُؤْمِنًا وَيُمْسِي كَافِرًا. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, person will have iman in the morning, but the evening will have become a kafir. These prophecies of Rasulullah Pak Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam are a glaring reality today. We just have to travel a little bit outside our cocoon, just travel a little bit outside in the world, and we'll see the condition, the halat that is facing the ummah. On the one hand, for us to be in this environment, for us to be corrected on a daily basis with Kalamullah, with the Kalam of Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, especially in this age of zulmat and darkness, this is such a great ni'mat, such a great bounty of Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala. This is only Allah's fazal, only Allah's karam. And the shukr of this, the gratitude of this is wajib. That we should be inherently grateful to Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala. That Allah has blessed us with the tawfiq of coming into this type of environment, this nisbat, this association which we have been blessed with. It is said on the variation of the nisbat of things, the values of things go up and they come down also. Very simple example ulama give. They say if you look at two bricks, the bricks will be made of exactly the same material. But you take one brick and put it in the mihrab of the masjid, and take one brick and use it in the toilet. Automatically one's attitude, one's value, one's thinking towards these bricks will change. The one which was in the mihrab of the masjid you would respect. The one that was in the toilet you won't want to hold it also. In essence the structure is exactly the same. What has changed is the nisbat, the link, the association has changed. This nisbat, talabatul ilm, it is mentioned, one incident, Yusuf Sahib Rahmatullah mentions his hayat of Sahaba. There was one Sahabi, Ghaliban, his name is Yasir radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He was dark complexion. He was a Arabi living on the outskirts of Medina Munawwara. He used to collect his wares and he would come to and sell them in the bazaar of Medina and then go back. And always he would bring hadiyah, gift for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So one day he was selling his wares in the marketplace of Medina Munawwara, and all of a sudden he becomes conscious that someone has caught him from behind and he's shouting that who is there that will purchase this person, who is there that will buy the slave. So he becomes irritated that I'm not a slave, I'm a free person. Who's making this announcement? And he tries to see who it is, and eventually when he turns around a little bit, he realizes that it is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that has caught him from behind. And then instead of trying to free himself, when he realizes it is Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he pushes his back more towards the chest of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is announcing who is there that will purchase this person. What is his response? He says, Ya Rasulullah, the goods that you are offering are very defective. There is no value in the goods that you are offering. What is the response of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He says, in your eyes it may be defective, but in the eyes of my Allah, these goods are very, very valuable. In other words, the maqam and the status of the Sahabi in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So according to the nisbat, the link, the association, the values of things go up and the values of things come down. One is how we look at things. One is how society is looking at things. And the other is the value of things in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This nisbat, this link, this association, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you with, that of talabatul ilm, that of being those who are acquiring the knowledge of deen. Wallah, my respected brothers, there is no nisbat in this world that can compare with this, if the haqq of it is fulfilled. Dunya, the material things of this world, that in essence, in reality, has no value in the sight of Allah. اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد ومغفرة من الله ورضوان وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور لا تمدن عينيك إلى ما متعنا به أزواجا منهم زهرة الحياة الدنيا لنفتنهم فيه قل تمتع بكفرك قليلا إنك من أصحاب النار قل تمتعوا فإن مصيركم إلى النار من كان يريد الحياة الدنيا وزينتها نوفي إليهم أعمالهم فيها وهم فيها لا يبخسون أولئك الذين ليس لهم في الآخرة إلا النار وحبط ما صنعوا فيها وباطل ما كانوا يعملون ولولا أن يكون الناس أمة واحدة لجعلنا لمن يكفر بالرحمن لبيوتهم سقفا من فضة ومعارج عليها يظهرون ولبيوتهم أبوابا وسررا عليها يتكئون وزخرفا وإن كل ذلك لما متاع الحياة الدنيا والآخرة عند ربك للمتقين. How many places in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of the valuelessness of this dunya? Mata'un qaleel, ayyamun ma'dudat. The whole tone, expression of Quran, you're students of Arabic, students of tafsir, that have a better understanding than myself of the manner in which the Quran denigrates this world. لا تساوي جناح بعوض. If you look at the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ما الفقر أخشى عليكم ولكن أخشى عليكم أن تبسط عليكم الدنيا كما بسطت على من كان قبلكم فتنافسوها كما تنافسوها فتهلككم كما أهلكتهم. لو كانت الدنيا تعدل عند الله جناح بعوض ما سقى كافرا منها شربة ماء والله ما الدنيا في الآخرة إلا مثل ما يجعل أحدكم إصبعه في اليم فلينظر بما يرجع. حديث upon حديث ما لي وللدنيا ما أنا في الدنيا إلا كراكب استظل تحت شجرة ثم راح فتركها. One principal message, that the one who has been blessed with this nisbat, with this link of talabatul ilm, of acquiring the knowledge of deen, for him to even look with lalaj towards the dunya is tawheen. It is a great insult to that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him with. This has absolutely no value. There is no comparison whatsoever. But as we mentioned, my respected brothers and fellow students, we have to understand what the haqq, what the right of this knowledge is. Time is very, very limited to go into details, and we would have been hearing nasihat and advice from our Asatiza Ikram. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to appreciate them and to show them the due respect that is due to them. Because the nuraniyat of this knowledge without the ihtiram of our Asatiza Ikram is impossible. It is impossible. It's like a person going in the rain and making dua that it doesn't get wet. If you want the nuraniyat of this knowledge, the ihtiram of those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the source of the knowledge, that is wajib, that is absolutely imperative. But very, very briefly in this limited time, it's not my intention actually to go into a bayan, but just by way of muzakara, few of the advices that we have heard from our kabirin with regards to that jazba and that zeal which this knowledge has to create within us. Because those who have been blessed with going in this line, we are referred to as those who are warithin, the inheritors of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So one is we are in acquiring or attempting to acquire the legacy of the knowledge of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But coupled with that, what are the dictates and the demands of this wirasat? What do we have to imbibe within ourselves? First and foremost, my respected brothers and fellow students, we have to become, how beautifully one of our elders in one ijtima, he explained the difference. He said, the difference between a Nabi and a philosopher. We are studying mantiq in the madrasa. Generally, philosophers, if you look in the past, were people that were ascetic, agnostics. They had certain claims that they made, they invited in certain directions. But he said the difference between the da'wat of a Nabi and the da'wat of a philosopher is principally one. That which a philosopher invites towards, it is not necessary that in his life he is practicing what he is inviting towards. But every Nabi of Allah, that which he invited towards was a practical reality in his life. So this knowledge, one is not just to acquire ma'lumat, but we have to imbibe this knowledge within our lives. One of our Kabirin from Nizamuddin, he explains once, he says, what became the means of me understanding the importance of this harkat and movement that the awam has to go in the path of Allah? He says, once I was traveling, and there was a halqa of ta'lim taking place. And in this halqa of ta'lim, there was one youngster. He was making muzakara at the start of the ta'lim. And he says, this youngster uttered one statement, and that struck a chord in my heart. What did this youngster say? Is ta'lim ke halke ka kya maqsad hai? Kis tarah ma'lumat ma'mulat ban jaye. How that knowledge which we are acquiring can become a practical reality in our life. How many of us the day we are sitting in the dars of hadith, and we'll hear Rasulullah Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, such is the value of salah in the first saf, that if you knew the value, you would fight with one another and you would have to draw lots to decide who will read salah in the first saf. The next salah after the dars. The next salah after the dars, how many of us are masbooq? Why? Because that realization is not there, that primarily what I am acquiring is for myself. There is another effort required for that how we can bring the reality of this in our lives. I remember in 1995, our Jamaat was in Jordan. And they put two brothers who were from Syria, two doctors. They were doing a specialist degree in America. And they were on their way back for their annual vacation, so they stopped in Jordan to spend 10 days in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they put these two doctors with us in the Jamaat. One of the days we went for Gash to the Islamic University in Jordan. When mahal and environment is incorrect, then we see the results. We're not here to run anybody down, but just by way of karguzari, when we entered the university, we saw students, Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmizi, they were carrying in their hands, but dressed in jeans and t-shirt. And clean shaven. There was absolutely no apparent display of sunnah. We went to meet the rector, the head of the university, Islamic University. He was dressed in suit and tie and a big portrait in his office. So we sat down, and myself and the doctor from Syria, his name was Ubada Zuhaili. So the rector asked us to introduce ourselves. I gave him my name from South Africa. So he said, that brother obviously spoke in Arabic. He said, I'm Ubada Zuhaili, I'm from Syria. So this rector got a shock. He said, who's Wahab Zuhaili? So this doctor responded, that's my father. So he says, do you know that your father's kitab, Al-Fiqh ala Madhahib al-Arba'a, is taught in our university? So he said, I'm aware of that. The whole demeanor and manner of this rector changed towards us. I mean, a lot of ikram. And then after this mulaqat, I asked this brother, the Rasul, I said, you were with us already 4 or 5 days, why didn't you tell us your father is such a prominent alim? And such an accepted scholar, well-known scholar in the Arab world. He says, I want to tell you something, I want to tell you the reality. He says, in our house in Syria, half the house is kitabs and half the house we live in. He says, my father has a collection of 250,000 kitabs. He says, by the time I reached the age of 19 or 20, I myself had typed for my father 250 kitabs on computer. I went for my specialist degree to America. Jamaat got hold of me. I went out for the first time for 3 days in the path of Allah. He says, Maulvi Sahib, that is the first time in my life that I started reading Salah regularly. House with 250,000 kitabs. Had typed himself 250 kitabs on computer, yet Salah was not in his life also. أول ما يحاسب به العبد يوم القيامة الصلاة. One is the knowledge, the other is the effort to bring that knowledge practically in our lives. The other doctor that was in the Jamaat, also from Syria. Last year our Jamaat was in Johannesburg, in Joburg. Our Markaz Baytul Nur. At the time of Fajr, at the time after Taraweeh Salah, I entered the Markaz. There was one person, he came towards me, he greeted me and he asked me, do you recognize me? So I just took a guess. I said, you are so and so from Syria. Got very, very happy. Because 17 years had passed. 17 years. That was the second doctor that was with us in Jamaat in Jordan. And the next morning after Fajr was his bayan. I asked him some karguzari that night. He said that he no longer lives in Syria because the condition, Allah protect our brothers and sisters. The halat and condition they are going through, words cannot possibly describe it. Just 2 weeks ago our Jamaat was in Jordan. We went right up to the border of Syria. If you look in the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, besides Makkatul Mukarramah and Madinatul Munawwara, there are only 2 other places in the world that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for barakat. Allahumma barik lana fi Shamina, Allahumma barik lana fi Yamanina. Land of barakat. And yet such halat, such conditions have come upon them. People were living in tents. We saw, one is to hear about it, the other is to see with our own eyes. Tents 4 meters by 4 meters. You have to bend over halfway just to get inside the tent. No lounge suite, no curtains, no stove, no toilet, no bathroom, just an empty tent, 2 or 3 mattresses, no furniture, no luggage also. 1 or 2 pillows, some blankets. And most of the tents, elderly man living, elderly person, 4 or 5 women between the age of 20 and 35, a lot of them widows, and 10, 15 little children. In utter poverty and difficulty. And winter is approaching. When we were there 2 weeks ago, incessant rain, very, very cold. And yet Allah has given them such jazba and zeal that not one word of shikayat, not one word of complaint, Allah, Allah they're only talking about. Because obviously the blood of Sahaba is in their veins. Such halat, Allah Ta'ala's hikmat, the test that is coming upon the ummah is a wake-up call for all of us. That just at one camp there were 300,000 people living in this condition. And in the outskirts of the camp another 50 or 60,000. We met one of the policemen at that camp. He says, we have confiscated 25,000 Qur'ans that were muharraf. 25,000 Qur'ans that had been altered were distributed in this camp. Because the people of Batil also are not leaving these opportunities. So one is they were tested in their dunya, they are being tested in their deen also. Like this, the taqaza, the requirement for Jamaats to go out and meet our Muslim brothers and sisters throughout the entire world, to offer them some comfort, to talk to them about Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we cannot possibly explain the great need that is there. The whole world is waiting. In any case, coming back, what I was mentioning about this doctor. He says that because of the conditions in Syria, he had migrated to Qatar. So the next morning after Fajr, last year Ramzan, was his bayan in the markaz. And he said an ajib thing in his bayan. He said, when I enrolled in the hospital in Qatar, my field was rheumatology. But before I could work in that department, it was the rule of that hospital that you have to work 1 year in the casualty department. Accident victims, or victims of emergencies. So he said, I had heard the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, man kana akhiru kalamihi la ilaha illallah dakhala al-jannah. So he says that I wanted to see for myself that in this casualty department, obviously there will be those who pass away who don't make it. I wanted to see, and Qatar is a Muslim country. He says, I wanted to see how many people will recite the kalima when they are passing away. So he says, in that 1 year period that I served in the casualty department, 100 Muslims passed away in front of me. And then he asked the majma, he said, how many do you think recited kalima at the time of passing away? 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, 10%? He said, in that entire 1 year, not one person recited kalima. Not one person. He says, I became dejected. I became despondent. He says, finally, when there were 2 days left in my tenure, in this 1 year, one accident victim came in, recited kalima and passed away. So he asked the majma that, you want to know why I am linking myself to this environment? Of the constant reminder of qabr, of akhirat, of Allah's greatness, of the sunnat of Rasulullah Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why am I linking? Because every day he says, I ask myself this question, will I be amongst the 99 or will I be amongst the 1? The challenges that the ummah is facing out there, my respected brothers, one is we are acquiring the knowledge of Rasulullah Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Coupled with that knowledge has to come the fikr and the worry and concern of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What was that fikr? What was that concern? What was that worry? Already exceeded the time. I know your azan is supposed to be at 25. It's just one incident on which I will terminate. In 93, when we were spending time in Pakistan, one of the zimedars in the markaz mentioned once about Molana Ubaidullah Sindhi rahmatullah alayhi. He says once he came to Ravin Markaz and he gathered all those who were involved with the running of the Markaz, 300 brothers at that time, he gathered them. And he said, I want to tell you something. He said on one occasion, Hazrat Maulana Ilyas Sahib rahmatullah alayhi, for 3 nights, could not sleep, he was pacing up and down for 3 nights. So his wife asked him that, Hazrat, why can't you sleep? Why are you restless? Why are you pacing up and down like this? He said, if I have to tell you what is making me restless, then there would be 2 people who can't sleep. And then Maulana Ubaidullah mentioned, he said, Hamara iman hai, Hamara aqidah hai, Hamara yaqeen hai, कि मौली इलियास नबी नहीं थे, सहाबी भी नहीं थे, ताबिई भी नहीं थे, तबे ताबी भी नहीं थे. ज्यादा से ज्यादा हम ये कह सकते कि 14वीं सदी के एक नेक मुसलमान थे. अगर 14वीं सदी के एक नेक मुसलमान के दिल के अंदर उम्मत के इतने फिक्र हो सकते कि 3 रात मुसलसल उनको नींद न आ जाए, तो फिर अंदाजा कर लो कि हुजूर पाक सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के दिल के अंदर उम्मत के कितने फिक्र थे. What must have been the worry in the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That the hand of a thief is being cut and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is crying. That Sahaba say, Ghazirun ka ghazir al-mirjal. The sound of a boiling kettle would come out of the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. On a daily basis, our extent of the knowledge of ahadith is increasing. How much is that fikr increasing? Has that fikr made us restless? Are we getting up at night and crying before Allah? One kafir when he is dying is going to Jahannam forever and ever. How many hundreds of thousands of Muslims lives are on masiyat? How many hundreds of thousands of Muslims on a daily basis their iman is being attacked? This worry, this concern is part of this wirasat, my respected brothers. And it is for this reason that our elders are encouraging us that during our chuttis or vacation to go out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that the halat and condition of the ummah comes in front of us. And practically we are woken up to the reality of this aspect of this legacy which we are acquiring, that is to imbibe within ourselves the worry and the concern of Rasulullah Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is the experience, the tajrubah of our kabirin in this field, that at the end of our studies, it is beneficial, extremely beneficial and important that we try and take out 1 year and go out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So very, very quickly, those of us who are in the final year or in the 5th year, we can make niyat that inshallah once we have completed our studies, let us stand up and give our names to go one year in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other brothers during their holidays also to give some time, mashallah. Very quickly, we won't take names, brothers can just stand up. Who's ready inshallah at the end of their studies for 1 year, mashallah.